Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to be talking about attendance policies today, and this is something that I've struggled with a lot for years. I did it the way that I think is pretty standard, at least among lots of folks that I've talked to, where I wanted to incentivize attendance, and so I would give students a certain number of free passes and then threaten to dock their grade if they missed more classes than that. I think that's pretty standard. And I ended up deciding that that isn't the best way to do things. There were probably two main impeti, I'm not sure what the word is, that led me to that conclusion. One of them was the pandemic that once there was a deadly disease going around, made me rethink a lot about whether I wanted to, what incentives I wanted to have in place for people attending or missing class. And the other was reading a paper by Daryl Close called Fair Grades. And I gave you a link to that paper here, which I kind of had feelings in the same direction as this paper for quite a while. And he finally brought me over into the fold, or at least mostly over into the fold, and thinking that when we're assigning grades, they really should be over mastery of student material and not over attendance. And that when I have a student who clearly has mastered the material, they're doing great on the exams, but I give them a lower grade because they were missing class, I feel like something's kind of gone wrong there. And in fact, I was lucky along the way that I had professors who didn't dock my grade, even though by rights they probably could have from what the syllabus said. So feel a little bit hypocritical enforcing attendance policies. So that made me rethink a lot of attendance policies. And so I'm going to share my thinking about this stuff with you today. I'm a philosophy professor, and so it's kind of a professional hazard for us to write arguments. And I've decided that probably it just makes most sense to do this old style with a handout. So hopefully everybody's gotten the handout both on Zoom and in the room. That's a little easier than trying to show an argument on a slide and then come back to it when people want to update themselves on it. You'll have it there in the handout that you can flip to. It's also easier for us to jump around between them if we decide to. Also, as a philosopher, I tend to have, it's pretty standard for philosophers to have some conclusions they're trying to argue for. So I listed three main points at the front that I'm going to make. First off, I really want to acknowledge that attendance is really important, that students in most classes gain a lot from attending class. And if they miss class, they tend to not learn as well and to risk falling behind and falling through the cracks. So I think attendance is really important and well worth encouraging. So I think there is a real problem to solve here. But the lion's share of this handout is arguments partly inspired by Close, partly me trying to think of the best arguments I could think of for why using grades to incentivize attendance isn't the right way to go. So we could spend quite a bit of time talking about as much or as few of those arguments as you all want, but I have them laid out here in case you're curious. And then the last section of the talk is making some more positive suggestions as to what we could do to still incentivize attendance and still bring about the sorts of learning experiences that we'd hoped our students would have and that attendance policies would help to encourage. Do it in other ways that don't require downgrading them for missing class. So I have a few starting points here that I hope are pretty common ground between us. So if you disagree, that's totally fine. One is this idea that some absences are going to be inevitable. We're always going to have students who have some sort of activities or illnesses or other things that they need to miss class for. And I take it that part of our jobs as professors is to offer ways of learning for the students. Some of it we're obligated to offer, and part of it is just being a good teacher to give your students ways that they can catch up if they had to miss class. I think it also to be pretty obvious that students learn in different ways, and some students get a lot more out of attending class, and other students are pretty good at reading comprehension on their own and can keep up with material pretty well on their own without attending class. And some students are either ahead or behind the curve and get more or less out of class because of being in a different place than the students that the lecture is aimed at. So I take that as another sort of starting point, and another thing that guides a lot of my teaching choices is that I try to give the materials for the students who can read and get it on their own to go fast that way, even if they miss class and even if they opt to miss class, and also to have enough scaffolding in place that the students who are behind can figure out ways to get caught up. So I think being able to appeal to lots of different students, including students who've missed classes, is probably part of good course design. Anyway. I think I already acknowledged the next point in the handout about attendance being valuable and students having a tendency not to attend nearly as much as they should. And so it's good for us to find ways to encourage attendance. Then I have a few sort of provisos on here about there being some special meetings, like I think exams, especially. It's hard to do exams that you can be assured that people aren't cheating on without having them in person, and the logistics just aren't practical to work out without pretty much requiring attendance for exams that you want to be proctoring yourselves. So in general, I'm going to be down on requiring attendance, but I think there might be special meetings like exams where there's just no good practical alternative but for us to demand that students, or at least pretty much demand that students attend those meetings. And there'll be questions that we can debate about how many things should count as special meetings like that. Like, do labs count? Do ballroom dancing class meetings count? And I'm not sure. I don't have well worked out views about all this stuff. And then I guess the last sort of qualifier I put down here on the front page of the handout is saying that, I tried to lay out arguments. That's what philosophers do. And I tried to make them short and sweet, so I didn't include all the qualifiers in there that I probably would need to include to get something that was technically correct and applicable across the whole university. In fact, that's probably just a fool's errand to try to do that. So I tried to aim for pretty broad applicability that I think will apply to lots of sort of ordinary course meetings, but I'm sure there will be lots of exceptions. And if what I say doesn't fit your classes, I apologize. I think that was going to be sort of inevitable here. Okay, so that's some starting points here. I think the way I'd like to go with this is, first off, just invite the people who are here, both in person and on Zoom, to tell us who you are and kind of what you're hoping for from this meeting, where you are in thinking about this sort of stuff. Then I think we should spend some time talking about whether using grades to incentivize attendance, whether that's a good idea or not. And then spend some time, and I think I will sort of, in fact, I've set in my own mind, I'll get my clock out here, set the 35-minute mark as the point where I want to shift gears to starting to talk about positive solutions or alternatives rather than reasons for not using grades. So I guess with that, can I go ahead and get some folks to introduce themselves and tell us what you're thinking about attendance and why you're here to talk about attendance? Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
So I'm Constantine Iclanu. I teach a class and I do give points for attendance, and I have a few days off, about a week worth of things that I don't count any points off, but then there are points off. So I'm really curious what your suggestions are and how to improve.
My name's John Potter, and I'm in the Simmons School, and I teach in the Dispute Resolution and Conflict Management program. There's no conflict now, so I'm really bored. Anyway, I have a third of the graduate scholar athletes here at SMU in my courses, and I'm confused. Attendance, on one hand, is mandated in the faculty student handbook for athletes. And by the same token, there's a lot of socialization that happens in the classroom. That when a student doesn't attend the class, they miss that opportunity, especially in an isolated community like athletics. And then on top of that, I have some students who have a lot of NIL money. They don't feel any obligation to class. So I'm looking for critical arguments for and against, hoping I use that somehow to make things better for the athlete. So you know when you're ready to solve that problem.
Okay. Yeah, I can maybe nudge us a little bit in a good direction, but solutions are probably too much to hope for me. But I really enjoyed a talk you gave at CTE a few spring kickoffs ago. So good to have you here.
Yes.
Testing.
Yeah, here.
He had the mic, but the mic was off. So let's do a quick repeat of the question.
Oh, I had a lot of graduate scholar athletes in class, and I'm conflicted on requiring attendance at the same time acknowledging that they have a full-time job in school. There's socialization that's a real plus for them to be in the classroom. But at the same token, I have to live with the reality that they have games and all that other stuff. So if you can solve that for me in 30 minutes, you're.
Hi, I'm Bevan Sadler. I'm in the Department of Statistics and Data Science, do the director of the Masters of Science and Data Science program. Love the CTE. I love what you guys do. Constantine, good to see you again. Always love, learned so much from Dr. Fish already in these meetings. So it's awesome. In attendance, can't wait to hear some thoughts and solutions and more food for thought. I've got one class that I only have projects. And so in my mind, even when I have exams, I require attendance just because I think that there's no way I could possibly test all of the learning outcomes that I want them to have. And so I think just by being in class, the socialization part, but also just I know that they're getting something if they're there that I'm not going to be able to test with an exam. With that said, I'm always open to making things better and trying to figure out, kind of how to do it better. So I'll pass the mic. Oh.
Hi, Steve Lerner, mechanical engineering. I've been here about 8 years. First year or two, after exams, I'd plot, grades, which covered a broad spectrum versus attendance. I saw an extremely strong correlation. I can't remember the R value, but really strong correlation between attendance and grades. So over the years, I've been placing greater weight on they have to show up. And that was probably 15% of their grade. Having said that, I do have a lot of athletes and they miss a lot of classes. I always have one student who, for whatever reason, decides their, attendance is not for them in any of their classes. So I'd be interested in any and all ways to improve student learning, which is my desired outcome, whether or not they attend. So look forward to your comments.
And I'll mention something that you're not the only one that sees that correlation between attendance and grades going up, right? So like even recently, I was just doing teaching observation for somebody in statistics, and they did it with the data for that particular class so far in the semester. And they were like, yeah, the higher grades are for the people that are attending class. So come to class. That's the incentive. Come to class.
Yep.
Which makes a lot of sense. There you go. So for his class, he saw a student that didn't feel like he needed to attend and he got a 40 on the exam. So there you go. Then it's justifiable.
Yep. Hi, I'm Rachel Wright. I teach in biology. I teach some upper level courses in labs, which will have their own set of constraints. But the big one for me for attendance is I teach intro bio. So the first course that all bio majors and lots of other people will see. So not only do I have my own educational goals, but I'm also kind of like setting the stage for the rest of the bio department. And I have other faculty that look to me and they say, what kind of stage are you setting for our students? What are they going to expect when they come to my class next? So I have to kind of always be thinking about that as well, regardless of my own personal feelings about attendance. So trying to work it all out.
Hi, I'm Mira, World Languages. And I'll start with that our department is in a sort of unique position because, we have a very strict attendance policy across first and maybe even second year. It's absolutely mandatory to attend class. And let's say across first and second semester language courses, we allow 5 absences, and then we have to deduct points from the final grade. And so the approach behind it is that it's communications, communicative class. You need to practice, you need to be there, contact hours, language, and so on. At the same time, I see a lot of great points that are brought up here in the outline that, in 2026, we have students that, might have to miss occasionally. Not all our athletes that go represent the university. And so we have those 2 categories. From there on, life happens. And reading here, I always believe in, my students always raise the the point, like, if I can earn my grade, why do you have to penalize me? And I think that the students, like, I think instead of penalizing, even in language courses, if we bring a lot of value, if students say, oh, if I'm in her class, every day my I will really improve and I will do better. If they don't see value, just like sitting there, doing whatever just to cover 5 days of whatever activities, then of course they would want to miss. So I think instead of trying to figure out how to penalize them and like really emphasize on record keeping and then like I'm going to deduct 2 points for every unexcused absence, which is always so sort of just to me uncomfortable, I would like to focus on making my classes really entertaining. It's a language class, let them practice, innovate, etc. And then I really think that we need to sort of revisit how we approach this because we don't want students to dread coming to our language courses. So I think I love your outline and you're like really bringing up a lot of points that I've been thinking about, just nobody has ever articulated them on paper.
And I'm glad you said the make your class more entertaining, which is actually the first point in the better alternatives one here, which I feel a little bit scoldy saying that, if people don't want to attend your class, it might be that you're not doing it right in the class. And that if you want students to attend more, it may be that making the class more entertaining and engaging is the way to go on this to help encourage them to attend without needing to punish them if they don't attend, but just make it more fun when they do attend. And I'm glad you said it, not me. I said it again. But
Gaining in the academic context, so stand-up comedy or anything like that.
Yeah, well, it's a tough mix. That sometimes having a few jokes in there can help to make it more fun and can encourage more of the learning too. Finding, you don't want it to be all jokes, but finding the right mix can be tricky. So we have a number of people on Zoom. I'd like to invite them to go ahead and introduce themselves as well.
You should be able to unmute yourself and we'll be able to hear you.
Brian.
Hi, this is Brian Rogers. I'm in APSM. My class is Sports Facilities and Event Management. I guess to offer a contrarian position, and maybe I need some guidance on this. My understanding when the university, I think, required us to use quickly attendance or use it as closely as we can. There's one of the reasons I was given was there's people that are paying the tuition of the students that are requiring us to prove that the student is attending class, trying to get the education that entity paid for. How can you give me guidance on that and how that applies to what you're suggesting?
Yes. So, yes and no. So it just depends on the type of class and the students that you have in your class. So if you have student athletes in your class, then you for sure need to take attendance because the ACC requirement. Yeah, particularly the Quickly platform is something that we adopted to just meet that need. But yeah, it's an ACC requirement, particularly if you have student athletes. Now, you can take attendance. That doesn't need to be necessarily tied to a grade, right? So you need to take attendance, but whether you're going to tie that to a grade or not, that's a whole different conversation. But if you are having a graduate level class, there are no student athletes, then there's no institutional requirement.
Good. And I also jumping ahead to the alternatives here. I'm a big fan of Quickly. I use it in all my classes, even though I don't grade off for missing class. It's a way that's pretty cheap for me because I just have to do a few clicks in my phone at the start of each class to open up the Quickly attendance. And it shows the students that I care about attendance. And as I'm doing it, I remind them that attending class is really valuable and of the correlations that people have mentioned that I've noticed too, that the students who miss class tend to get worse grades. And I'm not sure how much of that is causal and how much of it's just that it was the students who weren't going to do well anyway who also opted to miss class. But still, pointing out the correlation helps to encourage them, helps to establish the norm of attending class, even though I'm not going to grade off if they miss too many on Quickly. I also we'll see, I guess I am leaping ahead in solutions. I also pay attention to the Quickly records. And if I have students that are missing a lot of classes, I will reach out to them and gently nudge them to start coming to class again and remind them how important coming to class is. And for lots of students, the 1% off their grade is so small, it doesn't motivate them all that much. But having to deal with a professor who's calling them out triggers a lot more motivation for them. So in lots of ways, this is more motivating for them than threatening to slightly dock their grade would be anyhow. So I'm a big fan of using Quickly, just not using it for grades. Good. Who would like to introduce themselves next?
I don't know if you can hear me. I'm Tanya Alvarez in Jordan. I'm in the economics department, and I teach large sections of economics principles. And I do use Quickly. And I must say that I have mixed feelings that pertain to Quickly, because at first we thought, hey, we have the solution. We don't have to worry about it anymore, that students check themselves in. And in a way, it's become sort of a nightmare for me, because I want to be very fair that I've given them 3 passes. It's a Tuesday, Thursday class. So 3 passes, don't count. I don't care if it's excused or unexcused. I figure 3 times for the semester. The 4th one starts to count, and I will subtract points from the total points, not from the grade, but from a total of 400 points, but enough that it wouldn't make them think seriously about it, right? The problem I've encountered with it is that my largely freshman students, they have decided to share with each other their login credentials. So I will look at my classes and I will say, I know I did not see this student, and I know I didn't see this other student. So I opted to circulate a piece of paper towards the middle end of the class and say, well, here, I want everybody to sign in, and I'll try to match. But in some cases, not even that stops the students, where I have students that are signing in for others. So I'd had to involve the honor code and the importance of being an honest individual. And so I'm at a point where I'm like, is the effort and time spent into this even worth it? Because it does take time. I mean, it's a valuable lesson. It's important. But to me, it has been so much more demanding, because I'm not talking about one student. I'm talking about probably at least a dozen students who very freely think they will fool the system by not being there and getting credit and not being penalized, while some others that I know are not there and they are rightfully counted as absent. Well, they don't happen to have a friend that's going to log them in. So I don't know. I came to this because I was hoping to get a quick answer, a quick fix to the stress this is causing.
Wouldn't that be nice to have a quick fix?
Hey, that's what I'm for.
That's a quick fix to all your attendance issues.
Well, it gets a lot less stressful and raises a lot fewer fairness worries if you don't make a grade hinge on it. I, too, have some students who I know were not in class, but they show up on the Quickly thing anyway. So somehow they figured out how to log into Quickly at the right time. But they're only fooling their coach, and maybe they're tricking me into not nudging them into coming to class again. But they aren't getting a better grade. And in fact, they're going to be hurting their grade because they didn't learn stuff. And when the exam comes, they aren't going to be in as good a position to do the exam. So they haven't really cheated anybody but themselves if they figure out some way to say they were present when they weren't. And so if I were going to grade off for it, then I'd have all the fairness worries you were having, and I'd probably be stressed like you are. But, I'm just doing it as a sort of theater to help encourage them to come and show them that I care about attendance and that I encourage it, but not as something that's going to affect their grade. And so if they figure out a way to cheat the system, then it wasn't me or the other students they were cheating. It was just themselves and their coaches. And, I guess I don't mind if they cheated them.
And Justin, I'll share one more comment from the chat. Hi, my name is Chris Vera Phillips. I teach media law and ethics, and I'm required to take attendance. I value attendance because my course is designed to encourage discussion and for all students to learn from each other. Like in the Chronicle Higher Education article, attending to attendance. I also don't have excused attendance. I just have in-class assignments that you can't make up because of the interactive nature of the assignments. And many of these assignments are scaffolded assignments for bigger projects. I also have to say that I've never seen so many absences in my classes before this campus. From last semester, I've had at least 20 plus emails for absences and about the same number this semester. she honestly stopped counting. And then Alicia also said that she's an adjunct lecturer in her second semester in teaching fashion photography in the Division of Journalism and the fashion media program. Love the idea of meeting students where they are, but struggles with this when the big portion of the class is practical and highly technical. So teaching these concepts simply through reading a PDF is not beneficial. She wants her students to succeed because of the material in person. The material in person attendance is so vital. It is also challenging because the night class and it meets once a week. So challenging topics become all the more off-putting, at the time of day.
Other Zoomers would like to introduce themselves?
I can go. Hi, I'm Emily Budd. I teach in sculpture. And so I value attendance. It's really important for a lot of safety reasons. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
We were like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense in the sculpture class.
Yeah. But I really disagree with punitive grading on attendance. And I've been experimenting with, alternative attendance policies for a very long time. Just some quick things. I kind of try to I tie things a lot to the shop policy. So we have like a really strict policy that if you miss a demo in class, you can't use that tool. Obviously, you can't just start welding until you have learned all the safety and everything. And so that tends to like encourage pretty good attendance. One issue I have with Quickly is I really do take their attendance because I want to keep track of it. It doesn't mark late. And for me, that's really critical because we go over a lot of things in the beginning and then we break out into everyone working on their stuff. So that's kind of one of my like quick questions, I guess, about Quickly. And yeah, I'm just also really curious to hear what other people do about that.
I guess a real quick thing with Quickly, you can set it to be open to accept attendance for just a certain time window. So you could make that time window at the very beginning of your class, and then only the people who are there at that moment would be able to check in, which would effectively mean if you're late, you're not there as far as Quickly is concerned. If you want to know whether they're there at each time slice, one experience I had with athletes is they would come, get signed in, and then leave immediately until I contacted their coach and say, hey, you might want to know that this is what your athletes are doing. If you want to know whether they're there each particular moment, you'll probably have to do multiple different Quickly polls at each moment you want to know if they're there.
That's not really realistic during class.
Yep.
I have my TA help too, but I mean, when I'm like between a lot of tools and different projects and everything,
it's tricky.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Others who would like to introduce themselves? I haven't kept count here. We had Gabriella, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I can go. Hi. My name is Gabriella. I'm in World Languages. I work with Mira and Konstantin. My situation is similar to Emily's. I really don't like punishing students for unexcused absences, but I do because it's more or less a policy that we implement in World Languages department. But at the same time, mainly I'm here because I want to see if I'm punishing them for absences. I want to see if I can reward them in a certain way if they have good attendance. Also similar to what Emily said, not a huge fan of Quickly because I also count tardies, and 3 tardies count as 1 absence. I think in many ways I mind the tardies as a professor more than absences, and Quickly doesn't allow me to do that in an efficient way. So in essence, I would just like to see what are the alternatives to the punishing students, because also my approach to teaching is not really, I don't like the punitive approach. So that's why I'm here. I would like to hear alternatives.
I am curious about something. I have a question for everybody. Has anybody tried the approach of instead of punishing for absences, having bonus points for full attendance? Meaning, like, if you attend every single class, you get 10 points out of or like 5 points on your total grade or something. But it's like not have anything that has to do with punishing, but intentionally kind of rewarding at the end, kind of like extra credit, but not really an extra credit, right? Like you have a specific attendance grade, but never have the language of punishing. Like you can miss, up to 3 grades. It's like, okay, if you have full attendance in this class, you have, 5 points on your final grade. If you have, 95% of attendance or whatever percentage, you have 3 points, and then have like an encouragement to attend more instead of punishment for not attending. It's like just having a flipped approach.
Kind of. So in intro bio, I have a statement in my syllabus, or at the end of the semester, if your grade is on the cusp, and I define the cusp like a level letter grade, right? Like you have a 93.4 and it's a 93.5 cutoff for an A, right? And of course, we all get those emails. Is there a way, right? Can you smidge it? I have a statement in my syllabus that says if you haven't missed more than the allowed, which is 5, and I think you've completed all the assignments, then I'll bump you. So kind of. And it's been enough. It's pretty. Yeah, I have 5 allowed attendances. So if you're having more than 5 emergencies a year, what I tell students is at that point, it's probably, you should be talking to DAS.
Yeah, so for the chat, there was a yes. And then I have students asking for accommodation to the extra credit for the attendance. And then students that miss because they're sick or have an emergency will complain that the policy is not fair.
There are other Zoomers that would like to introduce yourselves. Last chance.
I will quickly. Hi, I'm Alicia Shortgen, and I'm in the University Foundations Department, newly in the University Foundations Department. I'm over from Dedman after about a decade. And I'm really just here to listen to the conversation. I generally have a skeptical disposition towards punitive attendance policies. I sort of believe in, maybe naively, the value of being in class and all the things that come from that with regard to grades and things like that. But in University Foundations, the courses that I teach were asked to use quickly. And so we do. And I find, honestly, that I don't necessarily penalize students. I'm actually very similar to the other Alicia in Zoom, whereas I do activities in class that are unable to be repeated or made up outside of the classroom. And so I find that students, even this semester, after missing 1 or 2 of those, are sort of getting the point that they're important and that their attendance is required, at least passively required. So I'm grateful for the conversation and really just want to listen and learn.
Anybody else? Okay, well, I think I may go ahead with things then. It sounds like from discussion, there are quite a few folks who are already kind of skeptical about whether we ought to be grading off for attendance. So I will leave you guys with this long session of arguments that I basically tried to put down, all the different arguments that I thought were more or less compelling that I'd encountered, and a few that I made up myself in here. I will note real fast that I'm like 80% sure of this position after having thought about it quite a lot, and still have sort of a 20% feeling that maybe some sort of grading off for attendance, at least in some cases, might not be that bad of a policy. So when I'm giving you all these arguments against grading off for attendance, a lot of that I'm intending as a sort of conversation starter, seeing some reasons that people might have for opposing doing this. But not necessarily as a conversation ender. So even though it's articulated as arguments saying you shouldn't do this, it may be that overall, in some cases, it makes sense. And definitely our classes vary a lot across the university. So I don't intend to be saying definitely the only thing to do is not grade off for attendance, though I do tend to lean in that direction in most cases. I guess you all probably have had the chance to multitask a little bit and peek at arguments. And my read on the room, the virtual room and the physical room, is that we're more hungry for alternatives. So I think we shouldn't spend too long on arguments against, but if anybody did see something in here that you thought different arguments that we could make against grading off for attendance, I will open it up briefly to talk about whether grading off for attendance is a good or bad idea. Yeah.
let me try to propose
Philosophers love dissenting points of view, so that's great. Thank you.
a bit of a dissenting point of view. So I feel like we have two obligations. One is to teach our students technical skills or subject matter skills, and the other is to perhaps impart to them some life skills.
Mm-hmm.
And most of our students, like it or not, will have to go to work. And when they go to work, attendance will be expected. What do you call someone who never shows up to work? Unemployed. But at work, there are no makeup meetings. If you don't participate, you're not bringing value. If you don't share your opinion, well, it's not influencing the direction of the organization, et cetera, et cetera. So is attendance or participation in itself a worthy activity? And I noticed some of your examples to not do it. Well, letters of recommendation. Are you reflecting on their technical capability? Perhaps not, but perhaps you are adequate. Perhaps you are accurately reflecting on their overall value to the person receiving the letter of recommendation. A lot of, like I said, a lot of our students will go to work. A lot will go to professional schools, law, medicine. How do you feel about going to a doctor who decided anatomy was not for me? You could get the analogy. Yeah? So,
well, if the doctor can pass the anatomy exams with flying colors without going to class, then in some sense, I'm happier with a doctor who's good at keeping up on things on their own and doesn't need a professor to spoon feed it to them. So what I care about is that they know anatomy, not that they sat in a class.
I teach lab. I have some lab classes. TA teaches it, but I oversee some lab classes. I've had plenty of 4.0 students. When it comes time to executing something, getting something built, they very much struggle. So just food for thought.
We'll find a way on grading and whether they can do that, but not necessarily on whether they attend. That's my inclination on this stuff. But I will note that, I tried to give the arguments in the direction of the conclusion I'm leaning towards, just playing devil's advocate a little bit here. A lot of these arguments are following Daryl Close's idea that grades should reflect students' mastery of the course material, which I don't think of my courses as being courses on attendance. They're courses on philosophy, and so I try to give them grades that reflect how well they mastered the philosophy, not how good they are at showing up on time. But when I play devil's advocate, I think that maybe lots of people interpret grades as being just a signal as to how good the student is at following orders, whatever the orders were. And if that's right, then maybe it would make sense to have some professors have the orders they give their students, and they can report on the report card how good the students are at following orders. Maybe the orders are show up at this time periodically. And if you interpret grades as just being an indicator of how good students are at following orders, then maybe they don't need to be purely about the course material. So that's the sort of train of thought that gets me in the other direction. But overall, I think it should be fine for students to be able to test out of a subject or to do really well on exams and thereby deserve a good grade in the class, even if they didn't follow orders in lots of other ways. My class isn't a class on following orders, it's a class on philosophy. Yeah.
So I think during the pandemic, it made a lot of sense to make changes to attendance policies, allow for attendance via different means, online, hybrid, etc. But it feels that all this has changed significantly since the arrival of AI. Mm-hmm. And I have observed that my students who don't attend classes and students who I don't incentivize to attend classes by daily quizzes or whatever, they are so lost. It is unbelievable because they think, AI is just going to solve all my issues. And in reality, it does a really bad job at it. And they're all surprised, but I knew, but I didn't know because I cheated, but I didn't cheat, right? So they're all confused about that. But anyway, so to me, I wonder how much this article or this philosophy still stands up nowadays with this advent of AI versus in a post-pandemic, society where online education was worth quite a bit, when nowadays online education is not quite there because of AI.
So I'm with both of you guys in thinking that students who miss class often are shooting themselves in the foot, that they're going to do really poorly on later stuff because they miss so much class. And so I think it's good to somehow motivate them to come to class. But I think if you grade off for attendance, you're basically double counting. They're already getting penalized for missing class because they're going to do worse on the graded things. If I grade off further for having missed class, then I'm just distorting it. I'm double counting their absences against them. I think the absence should weigh against their grade just so much as it hurts how well they do in the test. I don't need to add more to the scale to count up even more against their grade.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, so the question here, or the main point is not to penalize those that are capable of earning a good grade. And then we go with, oh, but our policy is this, so I'm going to deduct it from your final grade. Which, for example, if somebody earns a 90 overall A- in my course, but they have 6 absences, I'm supposed to drop their final grade to 88 B+. If this student, like, let's say they were there for the required time of the contact hours that were required for our accreditation, so that's fine there. We're not going to mess with that. But I don't think that I should drop those 2 points and give B+ for that 1 extra absence if the student, with reasonable attendance managed to earn A-. I don't, but then again, with the point that you made, that if someone is struggling, I would be reaching out proactively to the struggling ones, because in the end, we could penalize someone that is doing okay, but the ones that struggle, it's our responsibility to, but they're not the majority, right? Like, I mean, the extreme cases of missing, let's say, 14 times or like over 20%, they're not the majority. Yeah.
But if you did not have that strict attendance policy, do you think that a lot more students would be those students that are missing 14 classes or more? Like, do you think your attendance policy that is strict, and more languages, I'm familiar with it, is actually beneficial because most students are like, holy crap, I don't want to get involved in that, so I'm going to attend every time anyway. And then you'll have the occasional one that fails that way.
I think that the students that see value will attend no matter what. They don't have to be threatened. So basically, that's how I see it. Like, judging, every semester I teach so many students, like, and so I feel like, I mean, I'm not saying that there is a perfect solution, but I feel like I'm not completely comfortable with having these super strict attendance policies and being so punitive in the end and dropping grades, from A or A- or B+ to like C, or sometimes, as long as they've met their contact hours.
This is great, and I hate cutting it off, but I said before that I was going to try to shift gears into talking about positive alternatives while we still had time before our scheduled end. So I think I should go ahead and impose that here. And I have mixed this around, mentioning some of the alternatives as we went, so I don't feel too bad about not meeting our timeline perfectly. But at any rate, probably most of you have had the chance to browse some of the alternatives anyway. And I think just picking up on the points that you all were making here, I think a big part of it is helping students to see why attending class is valuable, so they'll be motivated to attend because they see it's valuable, rather than setting up some artificial penalties to discourage them from attending. And so I guess I'll just mention quickly, one of the suggestions here is having lots of incremental assignments where they can see, oh, I'm falling behind because I'm really struggling on this homework, and they can notice the correlations that we've been talking about, that, oh, when I attend class, these assignments aren't as hard. And when they miss class, they're like, oh, shoot, this gets really hard. And if they can discover that sooner rather than later, that can help give them the reinforcement signal to help get them coming back to class sooner. So that's one of the sort of positive suggestions that I had is, and in some sense, since these are correlated, they'll do more poorly on the assignment because they missed class and didn't know how to do the assignment. So there's a sense in which they've indirectly got penalized for their absence, which to me is enough. I don't need to double count their absence against them. The fact that they're struggling on the assignment is already penalty enough for their absence. So I'd like to open this up for folks, either if you had thoughts or questions about some of the suggestions that I made in here that you've probably had a chance to browse through, or I'm especially interested in if folks have other alternatives that you've come up with or heard about to yourselves that I didn't list. Those are what I'd most like to hear, because I'll learn something. Did folks have? Yeah.
I just want to build on something you said earlier. Oh, thanks. Ew. Just super fast. I think everybody just wants to be heard and doesn't want to be. We got big classes and small classes. You said something earlier about if you notice somebody's missing, and then give them a quick email. Like a lot of this could be kind of solved on the front end just by your like students might miss because feel like they're not going to be noticed if they're there or not. And if they get a personal email from the professor, maybe they're more likely to come in. That could be an alternative that doesn't solve a lot of what happens when they don't show up, but maybe they just show up and you don't have to worry about it in the first one.
And I do have a draft that I copy pasted out of email that I've sent to my students on the last page of the handout, which I'm not sure, I'm not great at crafting emails, but there's at least a starting point if you want to send emails to prod your students who haven't been attending. You can write it in your own voice better, I'm sure. Other thoughts that people have either about the suggestions that I was making here, or especially things I can learn other ways of solving these problems? I guess I'll highlight, we haven't talked about making the class more challenging, but I think in some cases students recognize this class is easy, I don't have to attend, so they don't attend. Now in some cases, if you're teaching a class that has multiple sections, you can't make yours a whole lot harder than the other sections are. You have to maintain some coordination, but in some cases it may be that you should have the class be a bit more challenging so the students will feel that they need to keep attending in order to keep up with the challenges as the class is going on. So sometimes I think that the good response to people not attending as much as you'd like is to make it more challenging so they'll feel like they need to attend in order to keep up. People are not, oh, good, we have a hand back here, go ahead.
Quick question. I teach seniors, so a lot of my classes are project-based. So how would you handle a situation where two students do a project, let's say overall the project deserves an A, one student is there 100% of the time, the other student is there perhaps 70% of the time. How do you handle something like that?
Yeah, that's tricky. I do some group assignments because I think they're good learning activities for students. But one thing I do that works fairly well is I'll have them do a division of labor report afterwards, where I have each student report to me about whether the division of labor was fair. And then I will basically, in cases where I'm convinced that somebody had done more than their fair share of the work, I'll give them a higher grade than the grade I would have just given to the group project. And in the case where I'm convinced that somebody did less than their fair share of the work, I'll give them a lower grade than I would have given the group project as a whole. It's a little tricky adjudicating some of those circumstances when you have students disagreeing about who did most of the work, but in the majority of the cases, I can tell from the reports that the student who says, oh, I did way more of this, or the two of us did way more of it, and the third person was hardly contributing at all. And I could see converging evidence that agrees with that. And often the third person's kind of admitting that they hadn't done so much of the work. So that helps with fairly distributing grades for group work, but it isn't perfect. So overall, I tend to weight group work lower so that it isn't as big a component of the final grade. And I tend to not give very high variance in scores on group work. So I have high variance exams. So the individuals who are doing really well at learning the material will do a lot better on the exams, and that'll be the main driver in the variance in the final grades. So that way I still have the group work as what I think is a valuable learning exercise for them and somewhat assessment informative. But I try to have the individual work, like exams, do a lot more in determining their final grade. Yeah, Rich.
I do have to say, my feelings aren't drastically changed from this. And I still have a lot of questions. I think one of the biggest things I'm coming back to right now, especially talking about the grade thing, and is a grade supposed to signal mastery of the material? Mm-hmm. I genuinely think students add to the classroom experience. Like, we do lots of stuff, even in the large lecture formats, lots of think, pair, share, lots of group stuff, asking lots of questions. And I think a student that's not there is not doing that. Like literally not doing some of the work and not engaging with the class. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm stuck on right now is like how to reconcile that philosophy with saying that your attendance shouldn't impact your grade at all.
Yeah. I guess I will mention quickly, because this relates to a couple of these things, that this sort of idea that I like having assignments where the easy, fun way of doing the assignment is being there in class. I, in general, think that I always should have makeup assignments, and I need them for some people who had a genuine reason for missing. And in general, I think the makeup assignments should be available to everybody, even if they missed because they had a work requirement that isn't an officially excused absence or whatever. But I tend to not feel bad if those are harder and less fun, that it'll help to motivate the students to do the in-class option in the future because it's more fun. I try to make them so they both are covering the same material. The grades I give them on both of them will be assessments of having understood the same thing, but I still try to tilt the deck in favor of having in-class be the funner, more engaging, preferred way for them to do it, but still give them a makeup option for those who need to miss or want to miss.
Yeah. So I love that idea. I'm writing it down. Like maybe I could say you can make up attendance if you answer these essay questions or something, which are things we discussed in class. But then I get back to the AI of it all, and I'm like,
yep. Yeah. And if I'm being honest here, I think that has shifted, that I've definitely noticed in my students that it used to be if they can work together on a homework and not have to do it themselves, they would much prefer to do it socially with each other. Now they have AI that they can ask their questions to, and it's much less embarrassing to show their ignorance to the AI than it is to show their ignorance to their peers. And so it's a lot harder now to have their preferred option be doing it socially with other students when they could go do it with AI instead. So designing activities that are more fun than doing it at home with AI, sadly, it's getting a lot harder to do. Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was kind of right down my thoughts here. My issue with that thing is like the reverse. I've got, particularly in this semester, but students that don't come to class. You got 2 classes in a week. And a lot of times in the discussion in the class, in the second class or the next class, we'll talk a lot about what we did in the previous class. So I've got a student this semester and throughout semesters that doesn't come to a lot of classes. So they will take up class time in the next class, dominating the discussion about things that we already covered and were the premise of the discussion from the first class. And so that kind of hurts everybody in the room that did come. They're not really sure. They have a legitimate question. And then, so I'll even write up, hey, we did cover that in the first class or whatever. That doesn't seem to bother them. And they'll always, they'll maybe come to office hours or even request, because in the syllabus, if you want to have a one-on-one, but then now we're eating up. I love one-on-ones, but not to cover something that we covered in the first class.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think that really helps me verbalize what I'm thinking here too about the penalty thing. Like, yeah, we don't want to penalize students for not being there, but there is a penalty. There's a penalty in my classes to the other students in the class that didn't get to hear what you might have added to the conversation. There's a penalty, like you said, next class when you're taking up more time. There's a penalty to me because a lot of your solutions are creating more work for me for my class in a mode that is not my course mode. I do not teach asynchronous classes, right? But the assumption here is that I should have a subtle ad hoc asynchronous version of my class, which doesn't sound great.
Yeah, I didn't explicitly say that, but honestly, that's the direction my teaching has shifted, is that over time, I usually don't have it ready the first time I teach a class. It takes about the third time I've taught the class to get enough scaffolding in place to have the asynchronous version available for the students who need to fall back on it because they missed class, or also there are just some students who don't really want to attend class. And if I give them enough scaffolding that they can keep up without attending, and they learn the material and do great on the exams, then I'm a little disappointed that they weren't in class, because I think there's some value to that. But as long as I can write the exams in a way that is assessing that they're getting the sort of mastery that the course is supposed to be having them get, then I'll say, well, they got it, even if they didn't get it quite the way I intended for them to get it. So yeah, I definitely have shifted in the direction, which has been work over time. But in some sense, I think it's kind of work you need to do. When you have students who have excused absences, you need to offer them some way of catching up. So you kind of need to do this. It's kind of part of our jobs to have that sort of asynchronous layer of scaffolding available for the students who need it. And I think it's also good to have it available for the students who will learn because of it, even if they didn't strictly need it by having excused absences. It's still a good thing for us to be offering them anyway. So yeah, it's work, but it's probably work we should be doing, I think.
So you've raised a lot of good issues, very much appreciated, got a lot to think about, but just food for thought, think out loud. Historically, I viewed attendance as sort of a leading indicator. If someone's not showing up, they're not likely to do well. Yeah, there's some exception, but while when you give them a test, that's a lagging indicator. You gave them a test, they did really poorly. Well, they missed all that time. You really can't make it up, and neither could they. So I'd like to not be punitive on the grading, but how do I, from a leading point of view, how do I discourage this behavior that ends up, 8 out of 10 shooting themselves in the foot?
Yeah, no, putting it in terms of leading versus lagging indicators is a nice way of putting it. And I hadn't explicitly thought about it that way, but I think some of the advice that I was giving here about having lots of incremental assignments so they can discover quickly that they're falling behind, that is trying to give them more of a leading indicator than waiting till the exam to see, oh shit, I don't have this stuff. And also my sort of sending out the emails saying, hey, you've been missing a lot of class recently. Hope everything's okay. It's really important that you attend as much as you can. That also is more of a leading indicator than the waiting till they fail the exam is. So yeah, I think that is a thread in some of the advice that I'm giving, and I hadn't articulated it quite that way. But I think the more we can turn this into giving them leading indicators or direct feedback right away that their missing class is not working out for them, that'll help to motivate them to start coming to class again, or at least getting caught up on material in some other way.